So we start as usual with a prayer for teacher and student. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Astu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great vigor. May our study be illumined. May we not unnecessarily cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace beyond all. So this is something different from Sunday morning's sessions, in as much as the Vedanta series question and answer is a general question and answer session. This also is general. You can ask any question you like. But you see, unless something is practical, then it has not much value. And so we are all essentially spiritual seekers. And so this is question and answer for spiritual seekers. And so as usual, I'll mute the microphone so you have a chance to formulate your questions, and I'll be happy to try to answer them.
Swamiji, I'd like you to discuss expectation. And I suppose what I mean by that is, in our spiritual practice, ultimately we realize that we're doing God's work. But in the cut and thrust of our daily, weekly, monthly activity, perhaps we have these expectations that can cause anxiety and therein can spiral. And notwithstanding that, you still realize in your daily prayer that you lay that work in the evening at Sri Ramakrishna's feet and you thank him. It's not my work, it's God's work. But just dealing with that anxiety, I'd just like you perhaps to discuss that.
Okay, thank you. Well, you see, there are different levels of answering any question, because naturally the first way we view things is I'm an individual. And we've learned to understand that. From the time we're born, self-awareness is something that we have very early on. I think there were some experiments done with different animals. A mirror is put in front. And some animals, what we think are extremely sophisticated, don't recognize themselves in the mirror. They may attack it. But others learn that the mirror is a mirror image of them, and they can see it as their own reflection. Elephants, for example, and dolphins have that capacity. So from a human point of view, naturally, we suffer from many things: fear, anxiety, doubts, temptations. But you'll realize that all of these happen in an area, as it were, called the mind. They don't happen in the body. And all our states of mind that can be maybe categorized into optimism and pessimism is all to do with the running script that we have going on in the mind. We are, in a sense, talking to ourselves constantly and listening to ourselves constantly. And so any expectation that is egocentrically organized or orientated will have within it an element of anxiety, normally prefaced by what if, or a commiseration, but a regret. So these regrets and these anticipations are all states of mind that we cannot do anything directly about. We have to deal with these things progressively. So the one part of your question, you say, we understand that all our work, we're doing God's work. And then when you come to offer it in the evening, you're saying that this is the Lord's work. But you see, if we think that this is God's work, this is one approach. It's not a bad approach, but it's not necessarily the best approach, because I think God can do his own work, quite capable of doing everything himself, or herself, or itself. And so those people who feel that they have to do any kind of work on behalf of the Lord, who's a little senile now, he's been there since Genesis, will, have a wrong understanding of things. But still, in the sense that all work is sacred. Why is it sacred? Is because the energy that we're using is sacred, and the expression of it is sacred, and work can be worship if handled in the correct way. The psychology of dealing with anxiety, and future orientation generally brings it, will be not to suppress it or repress it, but to allow it to come. To observe it is very important. Of course, we always observe it, but don't necessarily register that we observe it. So a wave comes in the mind, and we register it is coming, it is coming, it is coming. But then when it reaches its peak, we identify with it. But it is sure to leave and be replaced by another one. So the mental field is an area where many, many waves of different kinds will come up. And they will subside. They'll have their life, they'll subside. And to be able to observe it, to start with, is an indication of an unembodied witness standing there. Some entity that is aware of the goings on and all the perturbations in the mind. That's a very valuable thing. That in itself is valuable. But we can't leave it there. It's not just that we are detached, in a detached way observing it. We have the capacity, we have an exertion of will where we can now change the next moment and the next moment and the next moment. So we have to play a game like that. When one moment of anxiety comes and we register it, then we allow it to come, if you like. Yes, I was anxious when I was 5. I was anxious when I crossed a road. I was anxious when I went to college. I was anxious whether I would pass my exams. I was anxious when a friend of mine had ill health. All these moments of anxiety are there, but they're based on the dividedness of the world, the assumed dividedness of the world, and my relation to it. I stand there as an embodied identity with a certain personality and history, and I think that the world is something separate from me, and I try to engage in it as best I can. At some point or other, there must be a realization that if there are faults and gaps and difficulties and things which are bound to go wrong, in other words, if I have an element of fear like this, and fear, as I mentioned before, by definition is faith in heredity. I think I am the son of so-and-so or the daughter of so-and-so. This is my genetic lineage. These are my XY chromosomes. That's okay for the human body, but it's not necessarily the case of the mind. And so there's an unconscious area that we carry with us, as it were, where all these impressions from the past surface, and they come out as an association with what we see, what we register, and how we value the world. So, for example, if I value the human body as my body, then I'll be anxious about my physical health. If I register my mind as my mind, then I'll suffer from any attacks on the assumed I that is there, the assumed identity. Now we know this in relation to obvious material objects. We know that a floor is a floor and a table is a table. We know a shoe is a shoe. We know a cloth is a cloth. We know spectacles are spectacles. And that's okay. But the human body is also an object. And our difficulty is that we have formed this association with the body, this identification, so that when we do look into a mirror, we are saying, oh, I'm looking tired today. I'm looking energized today. And it is this mix-up, this superimposition of a fundamental ego with its object, subject and object getting mixed. So naturally, the way out of it is a separation of that. We have to learn to make a separation. And generically, this separation is called viveka, the discernment, where we're able to detach from something. If we didn't have that kind of detachment, driving a car would be impossible. Get into a car and say, this car is useless, it's not going, because I'm assuming that I have to move in it. But we don't make that mistake. Why don't we make that mistake? Because we know how to handle and control a car. And so we have to learn to control the mind in the same way. We have to learn to control actually body and mind. And the first thing that we have to do, the first step, is to re-register them. We can do this in a number of ways. So lovers of God, devout worshippers, will register them to the Lord's account. Lord, this is your body. This is your temple. This is your earth car. Mind, oh, it's not my mind. Lord, this is your sitting room. This is your inner throne room. It belongs to you. And then we can proceed with all activities and understand that all the energy that we are using throughout a day, we register to the ultimate causal movement, universal energy, which happens to be localized. And we happen to have the privilege and honor of calling it, or the mistaken notion of calling it I, and ownership is there. We have to learn to transcend the prophet-actor complex. I'm not acting, I'm not doing, and I'm not profiting from it. Or nothing is coming away from me. Profit and loss is not with me at all. And so that creates a wonderful, wonderful relief. We can become relieved of much of our stress when we understand this re-registration and this re-evaluation principle. And then what to see about all the objects around us. These are also expressions of that one energy. We have to be persuaded about that. And so we do it step by step. That is why philosophy is necessary, but it has to be practical. And the practical aspect of it we call yoga. You know, when I give talks on yoga, as I have done, and as I do frequently to groups, my first question to them is, what has yoga to do with health and wellness? And they feel surprised about that because they think it's everything. They think it's a health culture, something physical. Well, no doubt there's a variety like that, but that's not what we mean. What we mean is there is only one thing and we feel separated from it. And as soon as we register, the only reality is right here and right now. And so practicing the presence for a devout worshipper is a technique of understanding that here and now is the only reality. And by putting something consciously into this moment, we can transform the next moment, and the next moment being within our control and with a positive insertion about it, and the next second and the next second, we are assured that the future is all running smoothly. And if it's running smoothly, why would I be anxious about it? Now, of course, anxious moments come because this is a cultivation process. And during the first steps of this cultivation, the human element comes in, no doubt. So we have to take some fundamental steps. And ancient teachers and scriptures, they all attributed paths to the partless. They didn't go straight to the partless. And they did it as a necessary step in their teaching. There's a great text called Panchadasi, and the author refers to this technique. He calls scripture the well-wisher of the questioner. whose mind is still filled with ideas of space and time and causal laws, numbers and parts, and change and evolution. And so such a mind that we all have must be led gradually, not all at once. And it is made to dwell on the infinite in steps and stages. The partless, the timeless, the non-evolving perfect one, while the wise guides will slowly introduce these ideas with such language and concepts as penetration, transcendence, unity, all-inclusiveness, these kinds of values. And so as we go through life, we gradually have some kind of insight. And that reaches its zenith when this fragmented view, this duality of the perceiver and the perceived, we just outgrow it. We mature. We outgrow these concepts. And there's nothing to do except to cultivate it until we outgrow it. And growth is a peculiar thing. It's not forced. We put in the necessary ingredients: transcendence, penetration, unity, all of these words, strength and beauty, all these high values. We learn to see the world in a different way. We see, in short, we see the divine author of the universe inside everything. And once we see it in everything, when the mind is free, and it is often free, we look around and introduce these ideas in what we see, in what we hear, in what we touch, in what we taste. And that applies to so-called work as well. If I think that I am doing it, either right or wrong, well or otherwise, then I'll fall down a little bit, because most people cannot dedicate their full capacity of their concentration in unit activities. It takes practice to do that. This is called mindfulness, and mindfulness has been a popular term now in modern society. Even schools teach it, a version of mindfulness. The problem I have with the modern version of it is it lacks joy. We can add a little joy to it and increase that, because there's joy in mindfulness. There's joy inherent in movement, but we miss it when we just do it unconsciously. When we walk, it's normally an unconscious activity. We know I have to go from A to B. I have to go a certain distance. I don't think about the distance. I don't measure it. I only get up and I walk. And as I'm walking, the legs are moving. That leaves my mind free to think of other things. Supposing now, instead of allowing the mind to wander while I'm walking, supposing now I say, let me be aware of the movement of a foot as it reaches the ground. Let me be aware of the joints as they move. Let me be aware of the arm swing. Let me be aware of how the head is tilted. Let me be aware of how I'm breathing. Let me be aware of some sounds around. And there's no way, I'm not constructed to think of all these things in one go. I'm only designed to think of things in unit, so that my awareness about, say, how the foot is moving, when I'm aware of that, I'm barely aware of any sounds around. And then when my attention shifts to those sounds, I'm barely aware of the movement. This is how we are constructed, and we are constructed, fortunately. It is our good fortune that we're constructed like that. If all information came in one go, then we'd be half mad, but at least one thing at a time. And that means that it's not the ears that hear, it's not the eyes that see. Our attention or awareness that is aligned to all the sense organs makes for the experience. So I can use that. I can make that useful to me. I can increase my awareness and increase my joy, because, as I say, there's a joy in movement. When people do yoga asanas, for example, what are you trying to achieve? Now, if you think you're trying to achieve something, and then unfortunately, you won't get the full joy of it. The full joy comes in the expression of the movement. The movement is an expression of the health you already have. You know in the morning how delightful it is to yawn. Yawning is stretching the jaw, that's all. You stretch the jaw, you stretch the limbs. It can be a very great delight to stretch. And for example, yoga postures are really stretches. And the exercise comes because you're releasing tension from one area and you're placing it on another area. And that is called exercise. Now, we can't exercise the whole body all at once. We can only do one part at a time. We cannot play all the musical notes available on a musical instrument, let's say a piano, all at once. One note at a time. You cannot sing all your songs in your whole memory all at once. And even one song, you have to do it verse by verse and note by note. That's how we are constructed. So the anxiety goes when we, first of all, are able to observe it and then restructure it in such a way that we see it is all the divine play. There's only one thing there. And we can do this with various techniques. But the point is, we naturally outgrow our duality, our position of duality. And the result, the awareness that comes, that has no second to it. It is only that one awareness. And then the question comes, what will act on what? What will affect what? Who will be anxious of what? Or who can cause somebody else to act? And so the person who is attached to the body will feel that he or she is being separate from others and also separate from the Lord. If you're a devotee, the Lord is somewhere there and I'm separate from it. And the crudest kind of religion will put this Lord in the sky or at some distance to be recalled whenever there's a need, a kind of request, a petitional kind of prayer. But as we advance and grow, we outgrow that childish position. And when the spiritual eye has been fully opened through practice, then we see that the infinite invisible abides in all beings. And there's a famous passages to do with that in the Svashastra Upanishad and also the Bhagavad Gita, with hands and feet everywhere, with eyes and heads and mouths everywhere, ears everywhere. That one exists in the worlds, enveloping all. That first statement in the Isha Upanishad. That know that the Lord, Isha Vasham Idam Sarvam Yatkinchat Jagat Yam Jagat. Know that that one lords it and covers the whole world, envelops the whole world, and penetrates everything, all existence. Mahatma Gandhi was said to say, well, if all the Upanishads and all the scriptures in the world disappear, and that one opening statement remains, then that will tell us everything. And so the feeling of this immanent presence in this now makes a person fit for the revelation of the Supreme Truth as the all. And that then is beyond the range of words and concepts. And such great souls, of course, we know are rare indeed, but that doesn't stop us from moving in that direction. Because we're all pilgrims traveling on the road. And even if we are anxious about our spiritual progress, supposing at the end of the day we have a regret, oh, I didn't do the work well, or my offering is very poor, or I became anxious, I became doubtful, I became fearful, what a pity. This is additional negativity that you're loading the mind up with also. So we have to be watchful of all the activities that are going on in the mental field, and we have to be patient enough. All right, we didn't succeed today, next moment we'll do better, like that. So that's the whole idea. The mind, of course, by its nature jumps here and there. But we just say, I won't allow it. That's all. I'm not the mind, I'm separate from it. So now tomorrow morning I must prepare myself. I'll study something maybe, or sing a song. I'll prepare myself. I'll do some chanting. I'll see that is more skillfully done next time. I'll put some heart into my spiritual exercise, into my japa. And then you see, you now become the executive officer. You now become empowered. You're now steering the thing. And then you can stand back and say, how did my engine work? See, even the meditating section seems to be a kind of tool, the meditation section of the mind. There's a kind of engine, sensitive, of course, but more sensitive than that is the estimator behind it and the improver of it next time. And the person who knows from where you get the tools and the skill to readjust the next performance is much more subtle. That is you. And so the whole team, if you like, seems to be there. And if you study scripture of various kinds, it will say that this is God himself, nothing else. And the God of religion, well, instead of meditating and trying to steer this thing, this engine, this car, this mind, I must assert the idea, no, I'm in charge. I'm the estimator and I'm the driver. I'm the estimator and I'm the motivator. So we have to re-educate ourselves on that basis. You're not a mortal entity, as you seem to be. Not at all. You're the ruler, you're the creator, you're the skillful executor, you're the artist, you're the performer. You are all in there. Whole thing is in there for you. You are all in here. Not all that you are, not only that you are the self of everybody. Not only that, you're the self of everybody. You're the self of everybody, yourself behind all the scenes. You are the supreme actor and you are the constructor as well, the manufacturer. So when you poise yourself well in this way, then other things also vibrate well. You don't have to crash through a gate. You don't have to make an adjustment. You don't have to be anxious about spiritual life itself. You have to deal with it calmly, because that adds then to your ignorance, if you will, and adds to your pain. It's from a dualistic point of view, not from this non-dual point of view. A non-dual point of view will be a poised position and the absolute non-dual certainty that this is perfect peace and nothing else. So you need to hold on to that. And when you do that, you can see what happens. Something happens. Some shift takes place in the so-called outside world, because you never made any distinction inside, outside. And get used to it. Something changes. The equilibrium which you establish here, the certainty, the constancy, the fulfilled position, absolute peace, the good humor that you apply, the sportsman-like or sportswoman-like attitude, the creative artist in you, the poet that you are. When you put all that together and stand poised in the form, something changes. The whole environment changes. And after some time you find, look here, all this discord, all this anxiety, all this fear, all this doubt is gone. Somehow, just suddenly disappeared. Because you have a new field of understanding. You see, what we see as an anxious moment is just an interpretation. So when we change the interpretation, we change the scene. It's entirely up to you. You can't say I'm a victim of circumstances. People like me, people don't like me, or this situation is difficult, or the situation is easy. And if it's difficult, I wish it was easy. When you tune into that poised position, things will shift. The attention is drawn. Then the person's sickness is gone on the physical level. The person's poverty is gone. The person's loneliness is gone. It's worthwhile to stand like that and beam from there. What would you choose if you have two options, to frown or to smile? Why would you frown? Smiling is much better. There's something called laughter yoga. It's supposed to be a contagious thing. Even if it's done in a kind of artificial way, which causes a little embarrassment. Nevertheless, and I think that's on record, I can't remember who it is or what the example was, but I can certainly find it out. I can remember it if I try. But there was a man who had a very fatal disease. And he thought, well, you see, if it's true that all these disease is caused by wrong thinking, by pessimism, then surely optimism will change it. So put me in the hospital and don't give me any medication. And then, but please play me constantly movies where I can laugh, comedies. Or people telling jokes or something like that. Let me have a hearty laugh. Let me do it constantly. And of course, it's on record that the man got cured. If the state of mind created the same similar corresponding condition in the human body, then to change it, we can change our attitude, our outlook, our way of thinking, and develop some positive sense of humor. And the sense of humor is a great tool. Why should we apply it? Because we have a philosophy that says the only real explanation for this world is that it's something like a play, something like a drama. What other explanation can it be? The great scientist Reynold Johnson wrote a book, The Imprisoned Splendor. And there he researches all kinds of phenomena. And his last chapter, he says, the only explanation we have for this world will be contained in the Indian Eastern outlook of play, lila, we call it. That life is a play of waves. How else can we view it? It doesn't make sense otherwise. But do we take it like that? We don't, because we're looking at things from this dualistic point of view. There's no need to have a dualistic philosophy. We don't necessarily have to have it, We could have it when we were small, when we were young, when we were infants in our spiritual life. But we have to learn to systematically, progressively outgrow it. And if it's for the benefit of the world that you think of even that, you see, even that is achieved more peacefully, more pleasantly, more enjoyably if you have a position of non-duality. That is a position of unity, benefit for all. So we need not teach somebody then, because if I stand poised like that, if I teach myself to do that, if I stand exactly in the center of the universe as it were, well then other things revolve in a strange way. So that's worth practicing. That's worth seeing. Don't you think? Non-dual philosophy, that's what I'm teaching. It's the non-dual philosophy, that truth, it's not just in theory, because it doesn't work in theory. You can talk about it as you want the whole day, but you have to feel it. You have to start by seeing this divine self in all things, in all people, in all movements, in all things, whether they are static, whether they're moving. It's the one simple formula applied tirelessly over and over again. And people say, well, Swami, you only say one thing, see God in everything. Do you not have any other thing to tell us? No, I don't. That's all I have to tell you. I'm a one-trick pony. We have to educate ourselves to stand in a poised position, in the very center of the being, where there's in the center of the being, where there's no storm and no tremor, no anxiety, no fear. All that is around, but standing in the center, it's not there. It's gone completely. Absolutely good-humored. We can enjoy stillness. We can practice it anywhere at any time, even in the midst of other people, even in the midst of the busiest street that you can go down. And involuntarily stationed there, your natural home. And you can look from there. As soon as you look from there, your fear is gone, your anxiety is gone. And the so-called, and the tension is gone, the stress is gone, and the idea of imposing a solution upon other things is also gone. The capacity or the urge to change something, that urge is gone, because it will require the assertion first that some things have gone wrong. And they haven't. There's nothing that's gone wrong. As soon as you say that, you've added a negative into the unconscious mental field. So if you want, you can say, now I am the corrector, but that would be a big mistake. No, here comes the supreme corrector of the whole world. He'll find himself confronted by all possible mistakes. If you see yourself as a corrector, the Lord will come along and say, oh, I'm the supreme corrector. I'm the Lord of correctings. You come, your prayer, unconscious prayer, all unconscious movements is a kind of prayer. It mobilizes the universe. And so all those possible mistakes and errors and difficulties will come to you. At the end of your life, Lord, I never got to realize you or get some intimate understanding of you. Why is that, my child? I'm too busy correcting things. Why did you give me all these things to correct? I was like a car mechanic. And as soon as I finished fixing something, another car came, another car came, another car came. I never had any peace of mind. No, because you thought that things needed correcting, and you became a professional corrector. And I supplied you with all the things that you required, you needed. How else could it function if I'm the corrector? Well, then something to be corrected will be there, always. If you say I'm a crusader, then something must go wrong for me to make a crusade, isn't it? If you say I'm a reformer, well, then you'll have all kinds of things going astray for you to reform. And then you'll say, of course, 40, 50 years, I tried very hard. I lectured everywhere. I wrote books. I broadcast on the Zoom. I had even some, let's say, radio interviews and so on. I tried to tell people. I hammered it into their stupid heads. And yet it all broke down. Nothing happened. You know why? Because you, the Lord of the universe, said, henceforward, here comes the corrector of mistakes. And angels produce the mistakes for you endlessly so you can correct them. And the angels are simply a poetic way of saying the tanmatras, the subtle elements of this whole universe. As soon as you get rid of one mistake, another one will come. Another thing goes wrong, then you set it right. One anxiety comes, you deal with it. Another one comes because you felt that things are worth being anxious over. You wanted to pose as the corrector or as the one who is biting their nails and correcting things. I was saying, you see, an old woman on a bus clinging on to the railings with a face distorted in anguish. will not make the bus go faster. We have to relax what we cannot change. What cannot be endured, what cannot be cured has to be endured, is a saying. So we may as well transform the mind into a magnetic attractor of all things which are good. We have the capacity to do that. So the formula would be, you can say, I'll be a teacher, I'll be a savior, I'll be a guide, I'll be an uplifter of human beings, I'll be a reformer, I'll be a crusader, I'll be a world revolutionary, I'll be a business person, I'll be somebody who will make a fortune, I'll contribute towards society, I'll do them some good, I'll overturn everything, I'll make a perfect world. All this is an internal script which assumes that there are gaps and faults and holes and difficulties and errors all over the place. We can change it. We can say, come on, Lord, you made a perfect universe. You made the world, you saw it was good. Only I see it as requiring correction. And I know that your grace will flow through everything. Not only flows through everything, but your perfection itself, and nothing needs perfecting or changing. So we have to leave off what we have assumed to be a conventional position, and we have to take on something else. You can get an excellent good humor and poise if you want. And the non-duality requires an examination of all your motives. Every little motive is a kind of self-discipline. So, what makes you anxious? See, mostly what makes us anxious is being in a situation where we have a fear of an outcome, or where we are doing a task and we'd rather be doing something else. And both cases require us deviating our attention from what is here and what is now. And what is here and what is now is full, is free, and is perfect. God made everything in his own image. We found everything good. These statements, we hear it and we leave it. We don't take it seriously. As soon as we take it seriously, as soon as we start cultivating it, then we'll see we're applying practical Vedanta. We'll be applying something that is useful to us. Not only are we removing our own internal anxiety without directly doing it, just automatically it happens. But also we find we're gliding through life in a smooth way because we have transformed our reality, and thought alone has done it. So just in summary then, so I've taken the whole time of that question, sorry. So we have to observe the rise of an anxious moment, for example, as we see it then and there. And then we have to understand that there's something more subtle, there's an estimator behind it that estimates the lack of value of this and put in a non-dualistic aspect. In other words, using our imagination or using our concentration, we have to put God and his angels there straight away. That makes the crooked places straight, and take our attention and tune it in to the glory of the divine self. Make a practice like that. That is called spiritual practice. Spiritual practice is not sitting meditating. Spiritual practice is dealing with all the scenes in life in such a way that we transform it. Not by trying to do it, not by changing it, but by seeing it in a different way. So I hope I answered your question.
Yes, thank you very much, Swamiji.
So if there are no more questions, then we can close it off. Yes. So we beam peace now. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace beyond all. Good. Thanks.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Om